I'd like to call the meeting to order for the Measure LC Citizens Oversight Committee.
Good evening, everyone. George Harris, the Director of Finance for the city, and your appointed liaison for this particular committee. We have one procedural element that we're going to have to start the meeting with. We have a chair that's been identified as Mr. Vos, and we formerly had a vice chair that is an individual that has resigned. And so we have not replaced the vice chair role yet, and the council would need to do that. So in the interest of not having a vice chair, we need a volunteer to actually run the meeting tonight, and want to give everyone an opportunity to volunteer for that, and then that person would proceed with actually running the meeting. So do we have a volunteer?
Unless there's any objection, I don't mind running the meeting tonight. Okay. Unless there's any objection with the other committee members. Okay.
Okay. So Ms. Harvey would serve as the acting chair for the night, and now I turn the meeting over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting for the Measure LC Citizens Oversight Committee. Would like to take a roll call, please, Secretary?
Committee Member Derryberry.
Present.
Committee Member Burden.
Present.
Committee Member Yeager.
Present.
Committee Member Harvey.
Present.
Chair Vos. Chair Vos will not be in attendance tonight.
With that, I'd like to make a motion to excuse the absence of Chair Vos.
I second.
Please vote. With a vote approved, 3-0, or should have been 4-0? 3-0, since he's not sworn in yet. Thank you. Okay, going on through the agenda, we'd like to go ahead and take our Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask Committee Member Yeager if you'd like to lead us with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. So if we could all please stand. Okay, at this time, we have the city clerk who will administer the oath of office to our newest Measure LC committee member, Mr. Stephen Derryberry.
Okay, so raising your right hand and repeating after me. I state your name.
I, Stephen Derryberry,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
Thank you. And here's your certificate of oath.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
With that, welcome. Welcome to the committee. All right, moving through to the consent calendar, CC1, approved Measures LC Citizens Oversight Committee meeting minutes for March 22nd of 2022. So the first question I do have to staff with, I believe there was only the 2 seated members that would have been seated at that meeting for March 2022. So I don't know if the other 2 would be abstaining or if we'd make a motion and then vote with just the 2 of us. Is that appropriate?
They can either abstain, or if they've read the minutes, they can vote on them,
Okay.
if they've viewed them.
All right. With that, I guess moving forward, are there any speaker cards for CC1?
There are no speaker cards.
Thank you. Okay. With that, is there a motion and a second for approval of CC1?
Yes, I motion for approval.
Is there a second?
I second.
Please vote. Motion passes with 3 yeses and 1 abstention. Okay, new business, NB1, adoption of Measure LC fiscal year 23 budget proposal. This presentation will be made by George Harris II, our finance director, and Jason Cottle, the city manager, along with Mr. Trelise Nibula, the assistant city manager.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Well, good evening, and once and for all, we finally get a chance to meet in person in the chambers. So Mr. Derryberry didn't have to live through the WebEx version of this production. And so welcome aboard, sir. I think you'll enjoy what we have to present tonight on the projects for the next fiscal year, but more importantly, get a chance to kind of see what Measure LC is about, the revenue. I'll go over a little history as part of the presentation so you kind of see where we've come from. But more importantly, we get to highlight exactly what good that new revenue is doing in the community. So the last, and for those that weren't on the committee, the last time we did a presentation, which I think just includes you, I think Mr. Bearden was there. We did go over kind of what the original expectations were for the tax. We originally put a measure on the ballot that was expected to generate about $12 million annually. And so if you were in the community at the time, which I know most of you were, there was a lot of informational materials that went out and talked about $12 million, $12 million, $12 million, and $12 million would have, in fact, done an adequate job for what we intended at the time. We later found out, as we started collecting the tax, that we were going to receive significantly more than $12 million by the time we wrote the budget that year. So let's take it back a year and a half. The tax was originally promoted as $12 million. By the time we wrote in November, by the time we wrote the budget in May of that subsequent year, the expectation had gone up to $13.8 million. Fast forward 6 more months, the expectations went up to about $20 million. And as we are experiencing now in this first full year of receiving the tax, we expect to receive about $21 million from this tax when it was originally expected to be just 12. And so when we start looking at what kind of revenue it's going to generate over the course of the first 4 years, even at the last projection that we gave this committee back in October, we actually did an update as for part of mid-year earlier this year, but and it hasn't changed much since then, but I can tell you from October, we expected the revenue to generate in the current fiscal year of 2021-22 of $19.5 million, and what we're seeing is we're going to bring in about 21.6. So the latest estimates that we have going into next fiscal year, which is what's before you now, is that it's going to stay around that $21 million mark. The projections going into next year are very modest. We received quite a bit of a bump in that the experts that we utilize, HDL, that's our sales tax consultant, they expected quite a bit of a dip as a result of COVID that we just didn't experience. They, pre-COVID, during COVID, they expected sales tax to just not perform, and in reality, people still needed their toilet paper. They still needed to buy those cars. They still needed to buy all those products, but they were doing it online, or they were just really, truly just loading up into Costco and still spending that money. People still had the income to spend the money, and so we outpaced our original estimates at the $21 million mark. But the projections into the next couple of years are pretty modest in that they expect, so if you look at that second or the third column there where the actual revised projection, according to our current consultant, is the $5 million in that first quarter that we received in 2021. We are on pace, as you'll see in the next slide, to receive the 21.6 in this current year. And so our forecast for the next 2 years are very modest at around 21.4 and 21.9 respectively. This is the current year activity. It's broken up by the industry group as that we receive the money. The third quarter, so the third quarter being July through September of this fiscal year. Second quarter being that October timeframe through December, which is our Christmas quarter, which we expect to see a sizable increase, and you do see a bit of an increase there from the third to the fourth. First quarter being January through March, which we've received the dollar amount, we've received the money, but we have not received the breakdown and the reports from the consultant. So that's why you'll just see the total there, because that's what's actually hit the bank account. And then the informational pieces will come later. And then we have yet to close the second quarter, which would close at the end of this month, to kind of give us, to round out exactly where we would expect to be at the year end. But as you see through the third quarter, we've received 78% of what that projection is that the consultant has given us. So that's giving me some a positive outlook that we expect to meet or beat what the consultant's expectations were. Probably we may do a little bit better than that 21.6, which ideally where we want to be. We want to be more than what we expected. When we first met a bit over a year ago, this body helped us formulate kind of what the Measure LC priorities should be. And so we were able to take that dialogue, pair it with the vision of the city manager and staff, and come up with 4 really refined but general in nature priorities. Starting with life safety elements. Those life safety elements are those infrastructure projects that provide life safety, whether they be streets, safety in the parks, freeway off-ramps, all those things that provide those life safety elements. Public safety is the second, and that's more of a service element than it is an infrastructure element, but the public safety speaks to our public safety department, as we've identified in previous reports that have been a priority and will continue to be a priority as Measure LC serves as a source of funding for our public safety efforts. Quality of life, and so that's when we get into those elements that those things that we can do when times are good. And so that's the parks department doing the special events, doing those things, and really enhancing those facilities that meet that sense of quality of life that we have here in the community. And then being that you have probably on par the most fiscally responsible finance director in the state. I'm not going to say in the state, but I want to make sure that you know that last element of sound fiscal foundation and making sure that we have adequate support to accomplish all those goals that are set in the first 3 categories are done as well. And we highlight that and make sure that we're looking at reserves. We're looking at projections. 15-year projections is one we're working on now to make sure that, and Jason and I talk about this a lot, yes, we're doing a lot of things to bring in revenue to the organization, but you only get, with a tax like Measure LC, you really only get so many bites at that kind of apple. And so we want to make sure that the revenue that's generated here is not only sustainable for the long term, but it's managed appropriately, managed with care to where because we won't have another opportunity to go out and do another Measure LC type tax. And so making sure that we have that foundation, having that fiscal sustainability built into our plan is very important. Talking about staffing, so last year, Measure LC funded very specific positions that were needed to fulfill the ultimate plan and the goals that were set forth in those top 3 categories. So we did fund 5 new positions in the public safety department. School diversion program, there's 2 positions that were part of that public safety model. Those folks have been hired. We have a law enforcement, the hybrid model, so there are some folks there, staff assistant, staff support positions, and then 2 parking officers were hired in the public safety department. We did have some new support positions in the FIT department, which is my department. We hired an accountant to oversee the budget and treasury aspect, which helped to make sure that we are getting the money that we were getting, that we were expecting from Measure LC. So they're constant contact with CDTFA, which is the state organization that actually collects the money on our behalf and sends it to us. And so we make sure we have people that are constantly reviewing that. That's why I know how much we've gotten before HDR or consultant can tell us how it actually breaks down. We have constant contact with the state and making sure that we're getting the money in a timely manner. And then we hired a coordinator in our information technology division. And then another coordinator was hired in communications in the city manager's office, and HR hired 2 more support staff as well. So with this, I'm going to turn, I'm the finance guy. There is somebody well more qualified to talk to you about your projects and all the things that are happening in the Parks Division and more specifically in the Development Services Division. And so I will hand the presentation now off to Mr. Trolis Niebla, Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, George. So, like George said, thank God there were other voices in the room when we were putting this together. Otherwise, we wouldn't have this part because he would have put it all into reserves. But luckily, there were some other voices in there, and we were able to program a bunch of projects. So I'm going to talk about last year's budget, Measure LC budget, and then the accomplishments that we did in our Parks Department and our DS Department. And then we'll go into next year's LC budget and what's to come. Before I jump into that too, I kind of want to talk more big picture and take the focus off just Measure LC to give you kind of the big picture view of our budget. We talked about this a little bit at council last week, but this past year we're putting $44 million total into our CIP budget, our capital improvement budget. It's 22 new projects, which brings that to $191 million and I think 71 projects. So this is a small piece of a bigger picture that really is showing how much we're investing in the infrastructure and new projects in the city of Lancaster. It's really historic in nature. I think if you go back from 2019 to today, we've invested about $200 million into infrastructure. And if you look another 3 years into the future to 2025, you're going to see another $300 million there. So it's $500 million over a 6-year window. I don't think any city can say they're doing that. So let's jump into the park's accomplishments. So this past year, we got back to events. We had all the usuals, concerts, Fields of Drafts, Haunt at the Hangar. Poppy Fest was a huge success. It set record-breaking attendance, 45,000. I think on one day, it was a Saturday, they sold like $40,000 worth of funnel cakes. The event was packed. It was a good event. Facilities and maintenance, we had $3.5 million in that budget to build out. They've completed 86 projects to date. Some of those are Sky Tower Park, redid the batting cages, or are in the process of redoing those. Turf replacement, a lot of state of good repair. So if you go to our parks now, you'll see they're starting to look a lot newer and maintained very well. Performing Arts Center, we're putting $1.2 million in lighting upgrades there to make it state-of-the-art LED lighting so we can attract bigger attractions, because a lot of different performers, they have specific lighting requirements. Right now we have to rent those or just pass on those performers. We won't have to do that anymore. Lancaster Community Center opened. Development Services, what did we do there? So they established the regional recreational and event center that's out at the fairgrounds. We determined that was the location, and we've started that design process. We funded our TIDE team, so our team of illegal dumping eliminators. I think it was about $450,000 in this Measure LC budget, but the total program is about $2 million. That team goes around and cleans up illegal dumping. Before they were created, I think we had about a 3-month backlog on going out and cleaning up illegal dumping. Now, if you call us or put in a Comcate notice to us, those are cleaned up within 48 hours. So that team is on top of it and doing it. And I think the community has noticed that it's starting to look a lot cleaner out there. They also hosted 2 large-scale cleanups. So they did the SR-14 in collaboration with Caltrans, and then they also did Earth Day at Avenue H and 20th Street West. We started the design of the biotech incubator, so we're redesigning or doing tenant improvements at our current incubator to turn it into a biotechnical incubator. We completed public art, one at Sky Tower Park, and That's a pretty cool project. The artist went in, created a concept, and then he painted the lines on the walls, and then the community actually came out and did the art and did the painting. It's pretty neat. I had my kids out there, and a really good time. We also did 3 different boulevard crosswalk art locations. You can go out there now and see them. They look phenomenal. We've started our VMT programmatic EIR, and then our City Hall resiliency project. So we're in the process of designing the battery system and a hydrogen system that will serve as backup power should we lose power here at City Hall. So what is to come? This is the fiscal year 2023 Measure LC project list. You'll see we broke it up into 2 categories. One is ongoing funding, one is one-time funding. So the key here is that one-time funding, we're funding it this year, next year when we come back, and it won't be 17 million because that $28 million total budget is actually 21 million from this year, 7 million carry forward from last year. So next year there'll be about $10 million that we will be reprogramming in other projects that fit the criteria that George went over in the priority list. So what are we doing with that? We are doing some public safety, a lot of public safety, not improvements, but programs. So we're going to really be focusing this year on building out our hybrid law enforcement program. We put $4.2 million in this Measure LC budget in that. 3.2 million, that's for operations. So we're in the process of hiring a new public safety director, which we just had interviews for today. So hopefully we get that person in and onboarded quickly so he can start utilizing that operations money to build out his team, build out his programs, start mitigating some of the crime and homelessness and different public safety issues that we're having throughout the city. The other thing is there's $1 million in there for an extensive camera program. We already did 200,000 this past year, so we put cameras on the community center, a couple of our park sites. So this will be that next phase of that. Let's see, we've got parks. We have 400,000 for their master plan. So this is a master plan that sets their mission, vision, and core through 2030. This really creates the vision for our parks department, the programs, the facilities, the events that we do. We're going to be asking for a lot of community engagement during this process so that what we're doing is really what the community wants to see. We have 1.6 million to run and operate that newly opened community center. We've got 1.5 million in more parks enhancement, parks upgrades. A couple of the big things in here will be new basketball courts at Raleigh-Duntley. And then we are adding, and this is Jason's favorite part of the whole budget, it's 4 new pickleball courts at Sergeant Owens Memorial. So he's already got us in a tournament and we're ready to go. 875,000 at LPAC, which finishes out that remodel of that building so that it's state-of-the-art and we can attract all kinds of performers there. 525,000 in public art, so that'll be at Prime Desert Woodland, the little pocket park at Lancaster Boulevard and 10th Street West, and then the shopping center at 15th Street West and Avenue K. That's the old Toys R Us location. We have $1 million in here for a recreational workforce training center. This is just to start the design. And then we have 2 site acquisitions. So we are acquiring the old Antelope Valley Union High School District building. That building will be used as our public safety headquarters. So they will be moving over there. They will operate there. So that operating budget that director has will also come along with a new facility. It's really close to the existing sheriff's station, so it works well for that. And then we're also in the process of looking for a wellness center location. Partnering with the city of Palmdale, we're contributing $5 million, they're contributing $5 million. We're looking for a building, and then we're going to be partnering with a local nonprofit to run a drug treatment program throughout the Antelope Valley. So that's it for parks. Our development services department, there's $2.5 million in here to complete the design of that event and evacuation center at the fairgrounds. That should go into construction fall of '23, be open and operational in 2024. We have $2 million for LMD enhancements. We're starting construction on $3 million that was funded in last year's budget. That'll start, I think this summer, and then we're going to do 2 million more. What you're going to see here is a lot of rockscape and then an abundance of palm trees out there so that we really improve, A, the water usage that we're using on our medians, and B, just the aesthetics throughout the city. We have $766,000 in this Measure LC budget to continue the work that the TIDE team's been doing. One of the other components that TIDE has along with it is also this Tidy Up a Mile, and it's kind of piggybacking on what Caltrans did, this Adopt a Mile, where we went out and we searched for different groups in the community to partner with that wanted to adopt a segment of road to keep cleaned up. To date, we've already got 6 different nonprofits that volunteered to do that. So there's 12 miles that have been adopted and are getting cleaned up. $3 million to complete the construction of the biotech incubator so we can start attracting those biotechnical companies to start up out here. And then last, under DS, is $1.2 million for some parking lot improvements. So to fence an area off back behind here and provide secure parking, and also build out our annex, because with the remodel that we're doing here, we're bringing some more staff here, so we're going to have a need for more parking. Staffing, so with all of this, the $191 million capital budget, all the new projects, come the need for new staffing. So first up here, you'll see 2 new positions, one at the community center to help operate that community center and build out some of those programs there. City clerk is getting a new position to actually build out our hybrid law enforcement, the admin citation program. So that'll get up and running this year with that position. And then we have 2 new positions in our capital improvement division. As you can imagine, adding that kind of money to a CIP budget, it requires staff to project manage all these new projects. And then none of this can happen, though, without the people. So we're lucky here at Lancaster. We work with a tremendous staff. It's probably the hardest working staff that I've worked with in my career. And just wanted to give them a big shout out, say thank you to them, because it's their hard work that gets all of these projects done. It's their hard work that, you know, got the remodel done, that developed $200 million or build $200 million in capital improvements, and are going to build another 300 over the next 3 years. So wanted to give them a big shout out. With that, we're available for any questions, and we ask this commission to take action as recommended in your staff report.
So can we flip back to that slide that had
The money?
the money?
There you go.
So we're both available to answer any questions you may have. So before you is the action to advance this priority list for the use of Measure LC to the council for their adoption of the entire budget, to go along with their adoption of the entire budget, which is going to take place next Tuesday at the city council meeting. So if there are any questions about the list, we're available to answer those questions.
There may be some. Any this end? Okay. Any on this end? Of course I do. I always have questions. You know me. So I do have a couple comments starting out. You all are to be commended. It's interesting. You see on the news every day, and I'm guilty. I follow the stock market daily, vested interests. But if you look at the amount of money that we're spending in this area to be able to fund, you know, this measure with the taxation, and I think I've said this before. This is a good news story where Wall Street and Main Street are not aligned right now, because something's happening out there. People are spending in the community. And I was wondering if we have some sort of a heat map, because a lot of people are visual, right? If we have a heat map that says, here's the city of Lancaster, here's the greater area here, where are we funding? You know, we're gonna make sure it's fair and balanced. You know, are we doing equal on the east side? You mentioned Sky Tower, or Sky Park, excuse me, because that's on the east side. So that's good to hear. But if there are other areas that we could be able to show, like sort of a heat map that shows what we're doing and where it's balanced around the community. And I think that the more that you show that what's good happening out of this measure, I think that the public will be even more receptive. And I think they're receptive now. And then I also wanted to find out from the numbers, I know the 21.6 million, the estimated coming up, Do we see, I know it could be a lagging indicator, do we see that, I believe inflation right now, we're trending almost over 8% nationwide, what that impact could be potentially going forward? Are they right-sizing those future estimates on what that measure, what we could gain, if you will?
What can we see? HDL is usually pretty conservative, and so what they're utilizing as far as projecting out the revenue is pretty conservative. So they're looking at maybe just an overall 1.3% or 1% gain into next year. However, what's in front of the council next week is Finance's best estimate of how those cost inflation factors are going to affect our expenditures. And so we really have been considerate of cost inflation on the price of fuel, cost inflation on the price of our utilities, which have all been built in into what the council is going to adopt next week as far as our expenditures. The estimate, I think, of a modest 1% going into next year will take into effect a lot of slowing as far as growth is concerned, looking at the fact that we've seen the bulk of our growth the last couple of years when we compare it against what the discounted estimates may have been through the COVID time. And so all the experts in our field are basically saying expect it to be flat or very, very modest, which is what you see in that $21 million this year and $21 million next year. They just are not expecting a lot of growth. And so if the cost inflation is going to slow the market as far as how people are spending their money, that's how we're seeing it in that very, very modest increase that they project over the next 3 years on the revenue side.
And I also, with regard to that Adopt a Mile program, I know some really good aerospace companies that would probably want to jump on board and have some organizations, their employees, homegrown people that are working at those companies that might want to volunteer for some of those projects. So we might want to be able to see how we can get the word out there. Just saying.
Yeah, I can email you whatever you need, and
All right,
we
thank
would
you.
we would love the help in listing more people to
Okay.
adopt miles.
All right, thank you. No one else? I don't want to take over the whole.
So I remember when the ballot measure came out, thinking, just for a split second, there's not a chance that our community votes for this, in favor of this. I'm very glad that we did, because when we look at these kind of figures and what it is that the city is going to be doing with the money that's generated from the tax, it makes me more comfortable to spend money in the city as a citizen, to make sure that if I'm going to buy a car, I buy a car in the city of Lancaster so that sales tax can remain here, that I can buy my office supplies here in town so that the sales tax remains here. Because these dollars are coming right back into our community. Every single one of these columns is providing benefit to our public. I took my daughter, who's a softball player, to the batting cages and thought, man, these machines need some work. So it's the little things. As many of you know, I'm the president of the LPAC Foundation. We see artists every year that don't come to our theaters, not because it's not an amazing sounding theater, it's because we don't have the equipment. Oftentimes, our foundation will spend the money from the donations from the community to buy microphones and to buy equipment because the city doesn't have it in its budget. So but what is that doing? It's going to provide an opportunity for every night an artist comes here for 750 people to come enjoy what is this that the city has to offer. So, obviously I know that a budget is simply just that, a budget. And so, I'm excited to see how these dollars actually work and as we move forward. We've got some interesting times ahead of us, I think, but at the end of the day, this is money generated. This is going to be money well spent. So my hat's off to you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, Stephen, I think what's important is that when you look at these projects, they're on the list. There's a lot of retrofits or remodels or updates, whatever you want to call them. Pick a terminology. You get to a point where we have the responsibility as city staff and your hired guns, so to speak, to make sure we maintain the assets we have. And by the time we're done with this budget over the last 4 years and the next 2 years, we're going to have a brand new city. I mean, our streets, you've seen what's happened in the pavement. You've seen what's happened in the parks, even to the batting cages, to the LPAC. And then we start getting into that self-actualization, right? Once we've maintained everything we own now, then we can start saying, what's next? What can we do next? What can we build? What can we advance? What can we do bigger and better? You'll see that a little bit with the incubator, a little bit with the event center. But as those things get built out, we still have these resources. Now we have a brand-new city, and still the resources that now we can go back out and invest in new assets and new services. So it's really fun to watch this transpire. And, you know, I know Trelisa, George and I, all the city staff know that we have a responsibility. Our citizens voted this upon themselves. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of that, and I know you guys take that wholeheartedly as well.
Well, I was a former rec leader 3 in the 90s, and I could tell you some of the parks are pretty much in some of the same conditions they were when I used to work in those parks. And so, you know, to know that we're going to see those revisions, those updates to modernize the facilities, because things have changed. We weren't playing pickleball 20 years ago. So, you know, but nowadays, I mean, I can't tell you how many people are enjoying that sport. And so to know that you guys are seeing what's happening and making sure that the money is being well spent, you know, I think it's unfortunate that maybe we don't get all that good press every day for these kinds of things. So,
You know what, you mentioned a good point that I also wanted to ask, and I may have asked this before. Is there anything that, from going back to people being visual, when we do those projects, are we posting something that this is directly from Measure LC or a byproduct of Measure LC? The more we can foot stomp and let this community know the good things that are being done with those funds that they've entrusted us with, I think the better that it comes across. I mean, you're just speaking the truth, showing what's happening. So I think that's something that we probably should maybe take a look at. That's just my thoughts.
That's a great idea. We'll work on it.
That is a great idea.
I agree. To piggyback off of that, just in terms of communication, because I'm around and, you know, I deal with many people in the city, like I know about all these great things that are happening, but I do also know that there's a communication gap between the things that we are offering and those communities that you mentioned on that heat map that I wish we actually had, so we can understand, like, we have a ton of things going on here. It's not like we have any shortage of opportunities for the youth, for, you know, all the communities on the east side, things of that nature, but I feel like they're not getting the information, so I wanted to know what sort of measures are being taken in terms of communication to make sure everybody is aware of all the great things we do here. Because I frequently come across that, I'll say, hey, did you know the city of Lancaster is doing this? And they're like, no, I had no idea. I didn't get the information or whatever the case. So I just wanted to know what sort of things are being done to make sure that the information is free-flowing throughout the city.
Yeah, I'll jump in. There's a number of different efforts we're doing from a communications, and it's in this year's budget. I don't know if that's Measure LC, but it's our update of our Channel 28. So if you've ever tuned into Channel 28, it needs some updating as well. So we've budgeted funds to do a very robust news station, so that we don't have a local news agency, which is difficult, is trying to turn that channel into the go-to location for that service, for information. At the same token, we have our communications team is constantly putting up Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they're doing Snapchat and whatever else they're doing now. I don't even know. It's over my head sometimes now even. I'm the old guy in the office. And then, you know, we do the Outlook magazine, and we do billboards. And the one thing we're going to start testing is direct mail, because we have the same feedback. We get the same feedback, is how do you access customers? And I'm sure Stephen might deal with this, and, you know, you guys, Toyota guaranteed deals with it. I don't know if your customers, I think your customers know what you're doing, but it's really hard to kind of outreach and do that, because we're missing marks, you know. And then even this week of the Juneteenth was a fabulous success, right? We market our traditional ways, but there was some grassroots marketing going on. And it's how do you access that? How do we find the tools necessary to do that? And we always have the drive to, but it's comments like yours that say, help us, because we do. I mean, I think we see it in LPAC sometimes when we do a Hispanic show or a Latin show, it doesn't get the turnout that it should. And sometimes I think maybe we're not reaching the Latino community well enough, and maybe we don't have the tools to know how to either. So we need help from the community to share with us, hey, if you had an idea, if you did this, you'd get more people to attend your events. We're always open and have the resources to do it.
Yeah, that's something I can definitely help with. I feel like being tapped into organizations in the Black and brown communities, that's how we're going to get that word out, because, you know, many of them may not frequent the places you all frequent or watch Channel 28 or anything like that. But, you know, when it comes to churches and sports and things of that nature, nonprofits, I have relationships with many of those groups. And so I feel like really all it takes is just a conduit, you know what I mean? It might not have to be any one of you specifically talking to them, but if we can somehow funnel the information from here into those organizations so that they can get it out to, you know, their congregations and membership and things like that, I feel like it would help dramatically.
Well, good. We'll lean on you, Devin.
Say less.
Yeah.
I think procedurally, I just want to regress a little bit back on the agenda. I did not ask if there were any cards, but I think because optically I can see that there probably aren't any for NB1. So I did skip that. I just wanted to make sure I went back. You probably
There
noticed
are
that I
no
skipped it.
speaker cards.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, should we entertain a motion? So the motion would, I know what it is. It's the adoption of the Measure LC FY23 budget proposal. So I'll entertain a motion on that.
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay, please vote. Motion passes 4-0, unanimously with yes. I guess I would have said 4-0, so it's not unanimous because there's an absent, right? Okay. Just trying to be procedurally correct. Okay, with that, the finance manager and city manager, are there any announcements?
There aren't any announcements, but I do want to take this time to personally thank or welcome Mr. Derryberry to the committee. And I love having these meetings in person here in the chambers. And so that is the goal of the council, that we get all of our meetings into the chambers. And so I think it went well, and I think I appreciate this format a lot better, getting a chance to actually shake hands instead of, you know, making sure our cameras are on and our microphones are unmuted to be able to properly communicate. So please expect the balance of the meetings to take place in this space. And then just for everyone's consideration, we have yet to set a date for that October meeting. Usually it is planned when we get the most updated information about what's happening with the actual revenue and as we collect it. And so having the meeting in October gives us an opportunity to really go back into the numbers on how fiscal year 22 finished. And so it usually takes through almost September to get that data and how it was broken down into the different categories to be able to adequately present that to you. And so that October date is to be determined, so just stay tuned for that. And then as far as the schedule, we generally have 4 meetings. We'll have that meeting in October. We'll have a meeting at mid-year, at the mid-year timeframe, in the February-March timeframe. We have the meeting that we have pre-budget, which is now, I'm sorry, we're down to just the three meetings. So we would meet again in October, and then meet again in the February timeframe, and then the next budget prep meeting would be in June of next year. So those are our 3 annual meetings.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I'll ask for any public business from the floor and any non-agendized items from our recording secretary.
This is the time to address the committee with non-agendized matters. Speaker cards may be found at the back table of the council chambers. If you have completed a speaker card, please be sure you have placed it in the basket in front of the assistant city manager so that you may be recognized. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Please keep in mind that state law prohibits the committee from taking action on items not listed on the agenda, and your matter may be referred to the city manager or the finance director. There are no speaker cards at this time.
Thank you. Okay, with that, any committee comments? Are there each of the members? Mr. Burden?
Yes, I just want to say that for so many years growing up here, you know, like, well, I'll say when we were younger, it was kind of like we were talked down upon for being from out here. So we didn't, like, when I went to college, you know, we would always say, or when I'm out of state, we would always say, well, you know, I'm from LA. Nobody wanted to claim Lancaster. I'm thankful that I can actually go out into my community and see like actual things being done and changes being made. It's me having owned a business here for 5 years. It was like I started to take pride in my community, and I'm thankful that we're seeing all of these great things that are happening now, and it's a direct result of the work you guys are putting in every day. So I just want to say I appreciate that, because for these last several years, I returned to the Antelope Valley in 2016, and I have not been ashamed to claim my city. So I'm thankful just to be a part of this and to kind of see the growth happening like in real time. It's good to see whenever I come outside every 30 days or 60 days to see like actual real change happening in my neighborhood and neighboring areas. It's pretty cool. So I just want to say thank you all for everything that you're doing as well. Since everyone else said it, I didn't get a chance to say it yet, but I want to say thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, along those lines, I'd like to also say I'm happy to be from Lancaster, and that, I'm relatively new. 2017 is when we moved here after, and the initial response was, man, what'd you do? What'd you do wrong to have to come to Lancaster? And I mean, the list of positives that my business, my family enjoy being part of this community is it's too long to list, and it's because of the city staff and the mayor, vice mayor, city manager, all that, the leadership that you guys are putting out there is really a pleasure to be a part of, and I'm just glad that we're able to enjoy this period of time that we're enjoying, and let's keep it going. Yeah.
Mr. Derryberry, I'm going to set the stage first, because I believe I first met you with us volunteering with things like this. I don't know if it was architectural design, but you and I have been at this game a long time. So again, welcome to the committee, and over to you.
Well, it's no secret, the city of Lancaster is home for me. I just got back from an 8-day trip to Orlando, Disney World, with my 3 daughters. So I'm physically as exhausted as I've ever been in my entire life. But I have a funny story, because we had dinner reservations at one of the resorts. We walk in, I give the guy my phone number, 661, and the rest, and he goes, oh, he goes 661. It's either Lancaster or Bakersfield. I was like, well, it's not Bakersfield. So I said Lancaster. So here's a gentleman that was from New York, transplanted to Orlando, for some reason had a connection here to the Antelope Valley. So our reach is big. We're doing incredible things, whether it's aerospace. This community is so much bigger. Devin, to kind of piggyback on some of your comments. I spent 7 years in college away from here, although I grew up here, and it was almost a stigma in a way. You didn't tell people you were from Lancaster. And I remember I came back, and to some of Cassandra's comments, we did that. I think it was the Harvard Business School for the week that we all, a bunch of us attended. And I remember Rex asked me, well, why is it that you came back here? And it's just, there's an abundant amount of opportunity here that is just completely untapped. And it's things like what we're doing with this Measure LC that we need the community to understand, so that when we are traveling, or when our kids are going away to college, that they have pride in saying that I'm from Lancaster. I've got 3 daughters. I want them all to go away and experience the world and do amazing things, but I never want them to be ashamed. Driving around and seeing some of the opportunities that we're going to have from this, it gives me some pride. And I've lived a lot of places. Not every place has good and bads. If you dwell on the bad, you're never going to be happy. But if we can get people to understand all the good that's happening here, I think it's an incredible thing. Happy to be part of the team. I was really pleased for the invitation. I've volunteered any way I can over the last 15, 20 years. So I'm just glad to be here. So thank you guys for that opportunity, to the council, our city manager, and all of his staff. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephen. All right, with that, I'd like to also thank you all for all the hard work that the city staff has done with this Measure LC. Again, Stephen and I, we go way back with commissions, starting with architecture design, and not at one moment have we not been able to rely on city staff. So I feel like it's redundant when I say it, but I mean it when I say it, that you all do a lot of work, great work, and it makes us all proud to be representatives of this city in every way and every measure. So with that, we will now stand in adjournment until the end of October's meeting, and I think we have to specify what that date is. But for now, we'll adjourn until October. Thank you.